we live in this highly polarized, divided time where the wound between nature and culture has become so pronounced that the entire earth is in danger. And then the cascading levels of wound and the need for medicine and healing can be seen in the COVID crisis and the political crisis, in the economic disparity, in the return of repressed energies like hatred and misogyny, and so on. It's as if the wound has been opened on many levels. And so part of the premise of this work is the idea that that kind of tearing open, that time, the kind of polarization is not an unknown thing. It may be unfamiliar to us in terms of cultural experience and personal experience, but in the archetypal world, in the mythical world, in the imaginal world, that's called apocalypsis, or apocalypse is the translation now. And it's another pairing. And that pairing is really important to understand because it's a pairing of collapse and renewal. The archetypes come in these kind of complementary, polarized, potentially pairs. And you see the separation before you find the unity. So on the very big level, I think what we're in is the archetype of collapse and renewal. And then there's this other thing that's really important is when that is the archetype manifesting in the outer world, it triggers or initiates or ignites an archetype on the inner world, and that's the wounded healer. Wounded healer is the inner reflection of the outer chaos and disorder. And so it gives you the story right off the bat. First comes the wounds. Accepting the wounds activates the archetype, and archetypes are there to help us deal with the world. And so accepting the wounds, facing the wounds outside and inside is what generates the potential for healing. So that's another part of the setup. The unconscious seeks both to divide and unite. It must divide in order to unite on another level with greater understanding and awareness. So here's the poem. This is a poem called Healing by D.H. Lawrence. And the story goes that he wrote this as he was reading of the new psychological ideas and practices happening in Europe. He was in England, happening in the mainland of Europe. And this is the poet's response to the danger of psychology being mechanical. I am not a mechanism, not an assembly of various sections, and it is not because the mechanism is working wrongly that I am ill. I am ill because of wounds to the soul, to the deep emotional self, and the wounds to the soul take a long time, and only time can help, and patience, and a certain difficult repentance, a long, difficult repentance, and the realization of life's mistake, and the freeing of oneself from the endless repetition of that mistake, a mistake which mankind at large has chosen to sanctify. Fantastic poem. Very psychological in its own way. And so he's saying that what's making him ill, what's making us ill, you could say what's making the world ill is wounds to the deep soul, the emotional self. And that facing those wounds is required, not facing them, which is the daily practice of contemporary culture, is not facing the wounds or trying to blame someone for them. That makes everyone more ill. Facing them is the first step. In a long process, and we have to bear that in mind. Wounded healer is not a short course. It's the long course. It's an entire life. Taking the path of the wounded healer is a deepening and deepening of both the nature of the wounds and the source of the gifts. The gifts in this case being medicine of some kind. I want to just say something about the word repentance. You don't get to say it very often. I learned it growing up as a Catholic. And people think of it as, repentance, get the whip out and so on. But it actually means prayer. It's a form of prayer. And so repentance is bringing prayer to the wounded place. So that's just one idea that's in there. So some ideas related to the poem, related to the wounded healer. What wounds us would also initiate and transform us. I've been talking about the wound as the wound as the initiatory wound, which is also the womb. In going to the wound, we activate the healing and we also initiate our lives further on. That's a, kind of an ancient tribal idea, but it's also now a psychological idea. And so one of the images I was thinking of is from the Bible, Jacob struggling with the angel, wrestling with the angel. And so like the wrestling with the angel, we wrestle with our wounds, or we're supposed to. And the image of that is wrestling like with an ancestor, wrestling with an angel, wrestling with something divine. And what that reveals, that old, story that wound up in the Bible, is that the divine energy makes contact with us through the wound. And it tries to awaken us through our psychic struggles. And it tries to connect us to what is called, or could be called, this transcendent function of the soul, the transcendent factor of the soul. So struggling with the wound brings us closer to what's below the wound, which is the transcendent factor. Psychologically, you could call it the deep self. You can call it the deep soul. You can call it the hidden spirit of one's life. The wound is the way to get there. It's not in the way of getting there. The conditions that have no easy cure, climate crisis, COVID crisis, all the crises that we're facing collectively, are intended to bring out the divinity hidden in us and in the world. That's what's missing. We don't need more time, we need more timelessness. We don't need more method, we need more presence. We don't need more technology, we need more divinity. And the divine is hidden in the world. People still don't know that. They think the divine is in some heaven that you get to afterwards if you follow the rules, which don't turn out to work very well. The thing we're looking for is hidden inside us, but it's also hidden in nature, and it's hidden, in the earth as well. In West Africa, where the song comes from, they have a saying, nature is spirit with a green garment on. Engaging in nature is not a nature walk, it's a spirit walk if we're awake to it. And so that itself is a kind of medicine. And paying attention and connecting to that medicine is one way to activate the wounded healer between culture and nature.